percentages. One of the most important things when talking about percentages is to work out what percentage means. Now, I've highlighted cent here, and there's a few words I just want to talk to you about and sort of mention that see if you know what they mean. Well, there's century. There's both a century in time and a century in a certain sport, quite a popular sport. There's a centurion. There's the American cent. There's dollars and cents. What do they all have in common? Well, the answer is 100. A century is 100 years, or in cricket, it's 100 runs. If you look at cents, 100 cents makes a dollar, same way we have pennies to a pound. The centurion was a soldier, but he was in charge of 100 men. So cent means 100. One of the other things in math that's really useful, per, I suppose I should colour code this as well, per often means divide. So per cent, really, to me, means divide 100. And that's actually what a percentage is. If I gave you an example and I said, what is 13% equal to? I can, with no trouble at all, say, that is, okay, well, 13, let's write it out, 13 divided by 100. And that's actually how you convert between percentages and fractions. And what's nice is now that we've actually got a division, because that is what a fraction is, that's 13 divided by 100. If we wanted to, we could go one step further and say, okay then, what is 13 divided by 100? Well, I move the decimal place 2 spaces over, so it's 0.13. So percentages, fractions, and decimals are all linked. In fact, we call the topic in maths FDP, fractions and percentages. They often come together, and they're all intimately linked. They mean the same thing. You can convert freely between them. And I think that alone is actually something that a lot of people find a nice thing to know, because lots of people have a favourite. Some people really like fractions, some people like percentages, some people prefer decimals. So it kind of means you can always convert things to whatever you're most comfortable with or whatever is most useful for the question and use that to solve your question. So that's the first thing that's just worth knowing, that percentage means per 100. And again, hope you can see how I've color coded it, per 100. And from there, you can work out any fraction, any percentage, and back and forth and vice versa. So that's my first useful tidbit, and hopefully that helped, and hopefully it's nice and clear. And we'll see some example questions earlier how you can use this to go back and forth in all directions. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is how we actually find percentage of an amount. So this is the classic question, find 32% of 120. And even when we're talking about, increases or decreases, the core skill is still going to be finding a percentage, and then maybe as an extension, adding it on or subtracting it. So if you can find percentages of amounts, it unlocks an awful lot of question types. And I'm going to teach you two really useful things. But I'm going to try and help do it a little bit by discovery. So spoilers, I've got them out here. Maybe I could have hidden away. To find 10%, you divide by 10. And to find 1%, you divide by 100. But I want to talk about A, why those two numbers in particular are useful, because 10 and 1, that's not 32. But also how we can use the logic of what we just talked about to work this out. So actually, if in the moment you kind of forget, you can still get to the same place. Well, the first thing is that any percentage, any number, can be made up of tens and ones. 32 can be made up of a 10%, a 10%, another 10%, and two 1%. So if I can work out 10% and add it together 3 times, and work out 1% and add 2 more of those on, I'll have worked out 32%. And just realizing that you can work out easy percentages and then add them together to make hard percentages is a really good revelation. So we're going to just remember this bit. Maybe we'll copy the. Oh, where'd that circle come from? We'll remember this. Put it down there maybe because it'll be useful later. That we can split 32% into these. Okay, so I've said we can split into percentages. My rule, this is something I tell everyone, is just always, relevant to the question, always work out 10% first. It's almost always worth doing. How can we work out 10% of 120 in this case? How can we work out 10% of everything? Well, to answer the question, I want you to just think, what does 10% mean? It means per 100. It means divided by 100. So 10 divided by 100 is a fraction. Fractions can be simplified. So I could simplify this to be 1/10. I like that. So 10% is the same as 1/10. That makes sense to me. And I know how, again, because I'm quite good at my fractions, to work out a tenth of something. How would I do a tenth of 120? Well, the answer is you times by the top, which is 1, which doesn't change it, and you divide by the bottom. So to find a tenth of 120, I divide by 10, and that's nice and easy. Dividing by 10, I can remember that. I can do that with relative ease. It's 12. But I said earlier that these are all equal. They're all equivalently mean the same thing. So that must mean that 10% of 120 is also 12. So I'm also dividing by 10. How cool is that? So this step alone means that, as if you remember that you can convert your percentages to a fraction, you can work out what you have to divide by to get the answer. Now, personally, I actually just recommend, if you learn nothing else today, memorizing that fact. To find 10%, you divide by 10. That alone is going to unlock a lot of questions for you. And the reasoning why is down here. And the reasoning why, as I say, is because 10% is a tenth, and to work out a tenth, you divide by 10. Is that the case for everything? So I've proved to myself that I can work out 10%. Does that mean that 1%, I do it down here, that 1% is going to be dividing by 1? Well, it can't be, because dividing by 1 doesn't change it. Like times it by 1, it's still 120. And if my answer was 120, that means 10% is smaller than 1%. No, that can't work. So it's not just, and this is a mistake we made, it's not just that the number is the number you divide by. It happened to be for 10%, but that's why it's my favorite one to work out, because it's the easiest. 10% divide by 10. How do we prove to ourselves what we divide by with 10? Well, we put it as a fraction form. So how do I convert 1% as a fraction? Well, it's 1 per 100, so it's 1 divided by 100. So in fact, let's write it out. So 1% is the same thing as 1 over 100. Oh, well, I know this. To work out a fraction amount, I times by 1, which doesn't change it, and I divide by 100. So again, by really quickly just converting my percentage to a fraction, I can see really clearly what I have to divide by. So tell me, what do I have to divide by to work out 1%? You divide by 100. And again, this is another really useful one to memorize. It's slightly easier to spot from here, because hopefully you can just see without no simplification needed, that look, 1% is the same thing. It's equal to 100th, or 1 over 100. So I divide by 100. Okay, let's do that then together. 1% of 120 is dividing by 100. We saw that down here. So I'm going to move my decimal places 2 spaces over because it's 2 zeros. So I'm going to end up having 1.2. Well, I've worked out 10%, I've worked out 1%. How was I going to work out 32 again? Ah, yes, it's this down here. I'm going to work out how many, come on, what about you? I'm going to work out how many 10s I need to get to 30 and how many 1s I need to get to 2. And the answer is quite simple. Watch this, I'll try and color code it. If I know that 10% is 12, 30% must be 3 times bigger, because going from 10 to 30, it's 3 times as much. So does it make sense that if 10% is 12, 30% is going to be 36? Because it's 3 times as much. Oh, that was quite nice and easy. And what about 1%? If 1% is 1.2, does that mean 2% is going to be twice as much? I think it is. So 2% of 120 is going to be 2 lots of 1%. In that case, 1.2 plus 1.2 is 2.4. Color code it so it looks nice and consistent. Well, I didn't want 30 and 2, I wanted 32 together. Hopefully you can spot now that if I then want 32% of 120, do you think I can get it by just adding my 30% and my 2% together? If you do think that, the answer is absolutely correct. 36 plus 2.4 is 38.4. And that means my answer is to what is 32% of 120 is 38.4. So can you see how we've gone about and done it? We, to start with, and this is almost always the case, work out 10%. Work out 10%. And the reason why is 10% is so malleable. It's really easy to go to 10% to 30%. I just times it by the number I want. It's quite easy to go from 10% to 5% by halving it. Then, if you need to, work out 1%. That's step 1 and step 2. And we know, again, either we've just memorized that you divide by 10 and divide by 100, or if we need to, worst case, we can remind ourselves by actually just writing it as a fraction and then doing what the fraction tells us, because we know how to do fractions of amounts. Then multiply or times or divide the fractions we've worked out to work out how many we need. So in this case, work out 30% and 2%. And then finally, add them. So here were our steps. So we worked out 10%, we worked out 1%, we worked out 30 and 2, we added them to make 32. Now, obviously, in other questions, if you were working out 15%, you wouldn't add 30 and 2, you'd add maybe 10 and 5. But that method of starting with 10% and going from there is, for me, by far the best and easiest way. And in particular, it's the easiest because 10% is the easiest one to remember, because to find 10%, you divide by 10. Right, Ron. That's an example. Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe worth jotting these down so you've got an example. Hopefully that's useful. What I think we're now going to go on to do is some questions together. So let's put this percentage skills into practice first and foremost. So we're looking at some questions from our Teach It Right Develop book. To start off with, some nice, simple percentage of amount questions. Now, I would love it if all of you would give these a go. What I will do is maybe, and again, you can pause the video here if you want to, have a go yourself. But if you do need a bit of a hint and you're not quite sure where to go, one, and you've got the book, you can actually go back to the page 54 and read through some really nice, well-written instructions that go into a bit more detail than my quick example there. But I'll actually break up for you the percentages that I want you to work out. So I'll split each of them into the component pieces, like I did here in terms of 10 and 1. I'll talk about some of them and then maybe even go through a couple of examples before giving you the answers. So if you're happy and you want to make a start, you can actually finish the whole page. There are actually 10 questions if you've got the book. But if you do need a bit more help, well, then we'll go through them together. So off you go, make a start. If not, I'm about to give you some clues. Okay, so the first one, question 1, just work out 10%. Don't go any further. My advice to question 2 is to work out 10% and then work out what 5% is. And the way to do that would be to halve whatever 10% is. Then for this one, you're going to need to work out 10%, and from there, double it to work out 20%. I should color code it so it looks obvious it's a different question. So question 3, work out 10, then 20. For number 4, I would actually work out 10%, 5%, and 30%. And then from some combination of those, you'll be able to get to your answer. And for the final one at the bottom, you could work out 10%, or using the trick I showed you earlier, try and work out what fraction 50% is and see if you can get that way. So either work out 10% and from there work out 50%, or if you want to, try and have a think about what fraction it is, and I'll reveal the answer to you. Okay, again guys, now that you've got those hints, if you want to again pause the video and carry on, otherwise let's do some answers together. Okay, answers coming up. Don't peek unless you want to know the answer. So very quickly, 10%, we learnt from earlier that to find 10%, we divide by 10. So 10% of 80 is 8. This one, 10% of 60 is 6, which means 5% is half that, so 3. And from 10% of 5%, I can add that together to make 15. So my final answer for this one is actually 9, because I'm adding both numbers together. For this one here, 20% of 120, well, 10% is 12. So that means 20% is twice as much, so 24. And that means my answer then is 24, because that's what I needed. I wanted to stop there. I could work at 25%. For number 4, I always start with 10%, so 10% is going to be 20. 5% is half that, so it will be 10. And 30% will be 3 times as much as 10%, so that's 60. And now actually it's these two here that are combined together, and maybe I should say it's these two that combine to make the 9. Well, these two here, the 30 and the 5, that are going to combine together to make 70, which is my answer for number 4. So I'm adding 30 and 5 to make 35%. Finally then, for number 50, obviously 10% could be 150. And then you end up with timesing it by 5, and 150 times 5 is 750. Or, I said you could do this one, and this is another one that might be worth learning, but again, if you can work out the fraction form, 50% is going to be the same as 50 over 100. And if you look here, what does that simplify down to? It simplifies down to half. So what we've actually done here is work out half of 1500. So if you chose to, you could have equally done half of 1500, which also equals, final answer, 750. However you got there is perfectly correct. Okay, gang, the other half of the questions. Questions 6 through 10, and here's a little handy tip that might come in useful. So again, have a think, work out. If you're feeling confident, you might start wanting to use things like 50% if you can get straight there straight away. Again, if you want no hints, pause the video, start now. If not, again, I'll give you some advice onto the kind of things I might split it into. There's no wrong or right answers, there's just some things that are easier than others. I suggest giving that a go now. Right, everyone, if you're still here, I presume you want some hints. So for maybe 50%, there's a couple options. Again, I'm always going to start working out 10%, but I might also try and work out 50%. Or just jump straight to 70%. There's a few ways of doing that one. But if you worked out 50, you could then do 50% plus 2 10%, or from 10% you can jump straight to 70%, whichever's easiest for you. For number 5, again, I'm going to work out 10%. And whatever that answer is, I'm going to halve it for 5%. For 6%, the way I would do it is I'm going to work out 10%, because 10% very quickly gets me to 5%. And then if I add 5% and 1%, I'm going to have an answer. Keep my color coding going. For 23%, so for number 9, I'll do that down here. For 23%, I'd work out 10% and 1%. I think that's all you need to start. From there, though, you can work out maybe 20%, 3%, things like that. And then for number 10, 46%, again, I'm going to start by working out 10%, 5%, and 1%. And there's a way to go from these numbers to 46, but I might let you try and suss what you have to do with these last two. Right, everyone, off you go, and when you're ready to come back, ask me for some help or check the answers, we'll go through them together. Pause the video if you need to, otherwise I'm going to assume you want the answers. Okay, so 70%, so 10% of 3,000 is 300. 50%, when we worked out earlier, that it's half. So you might have just said, okay, well, half is going to be 1,500, which means that 70% is either going to be 300 times 7 or 1,500 plus 300 plus 300. Either way, the answer should be 2,100. So final answer, 2100. Again, for 5%, the best way to start is to do 10%. 10% of 300 is 30, and half of that is 15. So the answer is 15. For 6%, again, I still would work out 10% as a starting point. It's going to be 90. Then half of 90 is 45, which is giving me my 5%. 1% we said was dividing by 100, so that means it's 9. And then from these to here, if I combine my 1% and my 5%, that will get me to 6%, which means I just have to add the two of these together. So I'm going to be at 54 as a final answer. I appear to have changed my color coding somewhat. For number 9, start to get a bit harder, more like the level of difficulty that was in that first example. But again, let's do it. 10% is 15. 1% is 1.5. And if you wanted to, you might work out the intermediaries. So you might work out what 20% is and what 3% is. Because if you work out those two, you can add up your answers. So how do I work? 10 to 20 is double, so that's going to be 30. And 1 to 3 is times by 3, so that's 4.5. So as a final answer, 23% is going to be these two added together, so 34.5 is my answer. And then last one, 46, biggest one to finish on. Again though, 10% works the same way. I'm going to work out, in green, I'm going to work out 80. From that I can work out 5 really quickly because it's just half, so that's 40. From there, 1% is going to be divided by 10. You can either, with 1%, you can divide the 800 by 100, or you can divide the 10% version by 10, because actually if you look at the difference between here is 10 and 10. From here now, what do I need? Well, I could work out 40 and 6, but actually another way of doing this, which is just equally as cool, and maybe this you prefer this, how many 10% make up 80? Well, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 10%, so that's my 40. Then I need a 5%, so I add my 40 on. Then I need the 1% to add my 8. So if you prefer to, you can actually add it out like this, and that's going to lead you to your answer. So we've got 8 plus 8 is 16, plus another 8, 24, plus another 8, 32, then plus 40, 36. So final answer, 368. But again, just so you can check for completeness, if you did want to work it out and you worked out that 40% was this, 40% should have equaled 320. And you could have said maybe that 6% is going to be 5% plus 1%, so it equals 48. And then added those two together to get 46%. Either way. Right, guys and girls, fantastic effort. That was enough. And again, useful tip for our little Billy. It's full of useful tidbits in our little book. That goes over percentages and a few examples. Hopefully that was really useful. We're going to come back and cover more of these topics in block 4, get more practice, but I thought it was a really lovely opportunity for us to practice this now. Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and we'll reconvene again in a bit.